After watching the new hit anime Solo Leveling, I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys started thinking of what if Naruto had the system, or what if Deku had the system? Well, today, myself and that one we were going to be bringing you guys part 1 to what if Deku had the system. Now, the reason that I'm doing this intro obviously on his channel is because he's on a trip right now, so he wasn't actually able to record this for you guys, but luckily your boy came in clutch. So yeah, this video is going to be part of the actual full video itself, and after you guys are done watching this on Weeb's channels, feel free to check the link in the description or the pinned comment, and you can find the full rest of the video, which is a grand total of 2 hours long, on my channel. So with that out of the way, enjoy. Alright, so we're going to be beginning this story at the beginning of the My Hero Academia story. In this specific timeline, everything is going to be flipped on its head, because not only is Izuku going to be the sole inheritor of the solo leveling system, but he's also going to be living in a world where everybody else also has mana. Am I saying it right? Wait,
it's mana.
Mana, yeah, mana. So everybody else is going to be having mana, and it's not like it's only going to be the quirkless population. Certain heroes, which are already busted, and people with weird quirks are going to be gaining abilities to become hunters. Now, why are we doing this? Honestly, me and Weeb just kind of had a phone call before this thing started, and we thought of just some really cool and funny scenarios that could happen. So we figured we'd start the entire series off by explaining that, unfortunately, Deku's not going to be the only one with the power. But if you really think about it, he really might as well be, considering no one's going to be able to touch him by the end of the series.
Yeah, I don't think it's a huge loss. I think if anything, it's cool because we can see how like the system of quirks and how like awakened hunters interact. Something we were talking about before this is just like how pro heroes with abilities from soul leveling, if they were awakened, would work. I'm not going to spoil anything since we're getting into the first arc, but I think you guys will enjoy what we've planned in store for some of your favorite characters. So,
absolutely.
Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can start us off, and I think that a cool thing to do is I'm going to be breaking everything down to the moment where they get into the dungeon, and then you can take us off after that. Is that cool?
Sounds fantastic. Let's get into it.
All right, bet. All right, so here's what we're thinking is going to happen. Just like in the original, Izuku is still going to be born quirkless, but his counterpart, Bakugo, isn't. In this specific timeline, Bakugo not only is going to be an inheritor of his quirk explosion, but he's also going to be having the added bonus of having an awakening in this world. Now, his awakening is not going to be the craziest thing in the world. I don't remember. Did we say C or B? What were we
were thinking making him a C tier.
A C tier.
If we make him too high, yeah, because if we make him too high, then that could interfere with some story elements later. So I think C's pretty fair. Yeah,
I think,
but
that's
he still
fair
has
too.
his explosion quirk. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, bet.
So
yeah,
he's really like performing at a B rank hunter's level, but he's only rated as a C rank.
No, if anything, he'd be performing like at an A or S rank. No, because he is young.
Well,
right
he's still
now.
he's still a kid.
But later on, the dude's going to be performing at easily an S rank hunter level, and that's like just his quirk, if that's all he had. But anyways, continuing forward with what I was already kind of laying down, when this happens, we're going to pretty much be getting a world in which Izuku, just like in the original timeline, he gets bullied by everybody else, but now, not only is he living in a weird world where people inherit quirks, which is 85% of the population, but now Izuku's living in a world where people who didn't even have quirks before, who were in a situation where they literally were losers just like him, started awakening abilities. And Izuku would just get more and more desperate every day, thinking that, well, if I can't awaken a quirk, then maybe I could be a hunter. But as time passed, nothing happened. And Izuku could just remember his best friend, Bakugo, being able to go to dungeons by the time that they were already in middle school. It was insane. There's no way that Kachan should have been able to also have an awakening on top of an incredible quirk. Izuku couldn't help but be jealous, thinking that he wishes he had at least something. But
if only I could be strong too.
Literally, that's exactly what it would sound like. You know what I mean? We would then get the scene where the pro heroes are stopping like the gigantic villain in the first episode. Izuku's walking to school, and we would get the whole cutscene and everything like that. At this point, I can kind of just see Izuku not only seeing a monster in this timeline, but looking towards his left and seeing a blue portal leading into like a train station or something. And everybody's around there, and he sees the hunters, and they're wearing their armor and stuff. And Izuku just can't help but like look away. He tries looking at the heroes, but nothing. And Izuku's just thinking to himself that he can't wait until later, that he has to go into a dungeon. Because not only is Izuku finally awakened, but when he did awaken, he was even weaker than he was before. The dude awakened, but now he's an E rank hunter, as most of you guys could expect.
E rank hunter.
Without a quirk.
Genetic loss of the lottery right there.
Bro has literally never worked out a day in his life.
That's what I'm saying.
It's bad. And because of the fact that he's dealt with the same circumstances as Sun Jin Woo, this dude is pretty much cooked. And later he has to go into a dungeon. Bakugo in this timeline wouldn't be bullying Izuku for trying to go to the national school, but instead he'd try to bully him into submission to not go into the gate. Because A, Bakugo is absolutely tired of constantly having to protect Deku. Now here is where I'm going to pass the mic, we explain why.
Absolutely. So like Zether was just talking about, Bakugo is pretty protective of Izuku, and that's why he's trying to push him to not be a hunter. So kind of like a foil to how Jinhee was with Jinu, where she's pushing him not to do this. Bakugo kind of understands. So when Deku and Bakugo were kids and Izuku finally awakened, after Bakugo had his quirk and his awakening, to be an E-rank hunter, his mom, as we know Mama Midoriya, she would fall ill with the eternal sleep disease. That's right. Not only do we have hunters and the system coming into this world, but also the side effects of that, meaning that mana poisoning or the eternal sleep disease is now in My Hero Academia as well. And unfortunately, his mother would be affected by it. However, just like in the original, while we have the Hero Association, who is now responsible for both heroes and hunters, or the HH Association, they also have those same benefits that they offered Jinwoo in his timeline, where we have Deku now having to work as a hunter to maintain the medical bills for his mom and to keep her alive. Luckily, he doesn't have a younger sister like Gina, so he's only looking out for himself, but still, he's putting himself in danger just to protect her and his only family. Bakugo kind of respects this, but at the same time, he wonders why someone so weak and insignificant is trying to push themselves this hard. He essentially sees him as telling him to give up. So, with Deku entering into the dungeon, this would be an almost daily occurrence with him going to school, being pretty beat up and having wounds all over him.
Would be such a cool plot point? That Izuku has to go into the dungeons because he's allowed to go into a dungeon as a hunter, but he's not allowed to go into the dungeon as a miner. So he can't even make money doing basic jobs. And because of his age,
I think he can though.
He can't even. No. In this timeline, and because of his age, he's not able to work either. So this is literally all he has. It's either this or he gets sent to a straight up orphanage and his mom dies. Like,
yeah.
He has
pretty cruel.
Literally no choice. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, aside from that too, dungeons are even more like exclusive than just being a hero, because like in solo leveling, they provide a lot of materials such as energy and magic crystals that support the world economy. And not to mention, it's even rarer to be awakened than it is to have a quirk, with only about 8 million hunters in the entire world existing, which for reference, there is like 9 billion people. That is significantly smaller than the 85% ratio of having a quirk. So Deku both feels like a sense of responsibility even though he's just an E rank, and with his mom's life on the line. So we're going to be getting into the dungeon. Shall we get into the dungeon that starts it all?
Absolutely,
AKA,
bro. I really want you to cover
dungeon.
it. I really want you to cover it, not because like I'm like, oh, I don't want to cover it, but I want to just sit here from a fan perspective and listen to the story. Like, what do you think would happen?
From a fan perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gonna be good. So, like we've been talking about, Deku's been going into gates, and this is pretty much his only solution so far. He's been severely injured by weak monsters like goblins. Dude, and we see Bakugo coming in and defending him.
Can I start it before they get into the actual dungeon, like middle school day? All right, bet. All right, so I just had this really cool idea. So obviously we know that after the whole villain incident in the morning, Deku goes to school, yada yada yada. The teacher hands out the career aptitude tests. After this happens, I don't think I'm gonna see a scene where Bakugo blows Deku's desk up. Instead, he just kind of looks at him angrily, and when he turns back around, he would kind of have like a bit of a sad expression on his face. He's like, damn it, Deku, why do you do this to yourself? He would just be thinking this because a couple of months ago, Bakugo was still bullying Deku and treating him like absolute garbage, but then he found out the truth, that his mom is in the hospital and he has no other choice. So it'd be from that point on that Bakugo started like loosening up on his behavior towards Deku.
I could see it. I could see why, like how he finds out too. So maybe Izuku would be at the hospital and Bakugo would be going in to like kind of pick on him for getting stabbed by a goblin or just being weak. And he goes into the, like, he looks for the room with Midoriya and he walks into the wrong one, and it's just Izuku's mom just lying there, like slowly dying.
And you just see Deku, bro, you just see Deku on his hands and knees just crying, thinking, Mom, I'll get stronger, I swear. And then you just have Bakugo like covering his mouth and just thinking like, yeah, I've been bullying this kid.
Yeah, I think that's a big point too, because Bakugo is kind of like aggressive, but he still tries to do the right thing, even like if sometimes that is borderline criminal.
Yeah.
So I think he would have some mercy on Izuku after knowing that situation, you know?
Yeah, you know what's funny? Had this been like any other what if, like on some dark stuff, I'd still make Bakugo bully Deku, but we're gonna give him a heart in this timeline, you know? But anyways, because of that, Bakugo's not going to be bullying Deku and instead just like completely did a 180 where like he bullies him.
Well, he's still like harassing him. Yeah. It's just instead of him bullying him like physically, because he's already bruised up enough from the dungeon. We have Bakugo encouraging him, basically saying, you should get the hell out of here. Like, why are you here? Or I'll take it, or I'll fight the monsters. You just sit back and watch.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Where he's like trying to discourage Izuku from going into the dungeons, but he knows he doesn't even, he can't also at the same time. You know what I mean? Because Izuku needs the money. He has no other way to make money for at least 2 years because he's still 14.
And the Hunter Association needs hunters because they're so rare. And if dungeons break, even heroes without magic power can't stop them. So they kind of have to send anyone who's willing to go in to fight.
Yeah, and even if heroes could go into the dungeons, hypothetically, it would just be, or villains came out, they could fight against them with magical tools. The problem is, like, most heroes aren't suited to combat with little weapons. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, well there's part of that too. I just one of the issues with magic weapons is that they break quickly. So even if like All Might, for example, let's say he wasn't awakened, well, we haven't gone there yet. Let's say he isn't awakened for the sake of this argument. If he's using a big broadsword and it can only take 10 swings and he's fighting a big army of magic beasts, he's kind of cooked. That's all. But let's get into the story because we've been discussing enough and I'm sure the people want to get further ahead before
generational yapping. Literally generational yapping.
That is what I'm known for.
Yeah.
So, anyway, into the dungeon we go. Bakugo, of course, would be going into this dungeon as well, with it just being a regular D-rank dungeon.
I wasn't done.
You weren't done yapping?
I wasn't done yapping. I wanted to talk about the Sludge Villain. Okay, hear me out. I'm gonna wrap it up pretty quickly.
Is crazy.
I have to. I thought of something really cool. All right, hear me out. So after school happens, Deku and Bakugo both know they're gonna go to a dungeon. You have Bakugo's friends surrounding him, going, "Hey, Bakugo, heard you're going to a dungeon today. You're gonna make a lot of money after school, aren't you?" Bakugo would be smirking, saying, "Yeah, it's just a D-rank dungeon, but I'm pretty glad I get to work on my quirk and my awakened powers, so it's gonna be pretty fun." After this, you would just kind of have Deku hearing about this and kind of like wincing, thinking, "Guess I have to go into another dungeon." You would just get this slow scene where Bakugo walks over towards Deku and goes, "Hey, Deku, But then, Deku just grabs his things and says, "I'm sorry, Bakugo. I really have to go. You're not going to change my mind about the dungeon." And then we just get this scene where Bakugo watches Deku step out. Then we could get this moment in time where Deku makes the same path home. He takes a shortcut because he wants to get a meal in before he goes to the dungeon. And we would just have Bakugo who was like following Izuku, And we would get the Sludge Villain basically pop up. Bakugo ends up saving Izuku in this timeline because All Might wasn't around. Now there's dungeons. Like, All Might can't exactly just be focusing on everything other than that. He's actually in dungeons in this timeline because he is a rank healer.
Yeah, he is. Okay. So just to get a little bit ahead of before we get into the double dungeon incident, like Zether was talking about, we decided to make All Might a awakened hunter, but just like our Kim Song, the hunter who joined the the dungeon the first time, who trained as a swordsman and became a mage hunter, All Might would have awakened as like this brawler monk type character to be a healing type hunter. So he doesn't have any offensive magical abilities, but he can heal himself and others. Which, you know, that's pretty interesting. I think that's a good character. It kind of suits him.
It makes him also a lot stronger too because of his injury.
Yeah, because he can heal himself after All for One's attack, which happened before the Awakenings.
Absolutely.
For reference, we didn't really talk about this. The Awakenings and Gates appeared around 10 years before the start of MHA's events with like the middle school and high school. So when Deku and Bakugo were children is when the Gates arrived and started occurring on the planet. But yeah.
So jumping back into
Sludge
what
Villain.
I was setting up, we would get Bakugo saving Deku, blowing the Sludge Villain into a bunch of pieces because of the fact that he has the enhancements of being a hunter, and it just completely decimated the villain. After this, we would get a scene where Bakugo tells him, "Dang it, Deku, you're so useless. You can't even beat some damn Sludge Villain." You would just get Deku looking down, thinking, "I know, but..." As from here, Bakugo looks at him and says, "You're not gonna give up going on this quest, are you? Here." As he would hand him a blade, a pretty big sword, as Deku would look at it and say, "Gachan, are you..." As Bakugo would say, "I'm not gonna say it again, damn it. Just take the sword and meet me at the dungeon later. I'm gonna watch your back like usual. Just stay out of my way." As we would get an angry Bakugo walking away, as
Dude,
you know,
I love that.
yeah,
What?
yeah, that's what
so-
I'm saying.
that's
Let me
so
cook, bro. You know what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying.
All right, but anyways,
All right,
then we
keep
get
going,
Deku going home, and this is where I hand you the reins. You know?
All right, so Sludge Villain has been turned to bits, hopefully reported to the police, otherwise they might be reforming later, who knows? But for now, the dungeon is awaiting. Deku would have his like Hunter Hero Association's phone, which everyone is provided to get called to dungeons, and he would get the alert, just as Bakugo had known about earlier. He grabbed the short sword that Bakugo had provided for him, this being way out of his league in terms of price, since Bakugo has both the benefit of having both his parents around and having the money coming out of dungeons since he's a C-rank hunter, so he can actually go into higher, more difficult dungeons and fight monsters and win. But regardless, Izuku would grab the sword, thanking Kachan in his mind, and grabbing a small backpack, knowing the last time that he had been trapped inside of a dungeon for hours at a time and had almost starved to death. He would follow the path using the maps on the phone before arriving in front of the gate. The gate would be swirling into this blue energetic mass, with himself, Bakugo, and a few other regulars there, with most of them being older or retired or younger kids like himself and Bakugo. Altogether, there were about 10 hunters, which would be more than enough for a weak D-rank gate like this. Although, considering he was an E-rank, even D-rank gates were scary and life-threatening. Once everyone arrived, Bakugo would naturally be picked as the leader for this group since he is a C-rank hunter, making him one of the highest level at the association level, since most guilds, like the Hunter and Hero Association teams, aren't going to be picking out of minors to join them as sidekicks. For reference, for my solo leveling fans, I think guilds are kind of going to be replaced here with the companies that heroes run. So like the internships we saw of Gran Torino and Best Genus. Instead, these would be like miniature guilds with large heroes running them and recruiting both hunters and heroes to join them to take on villains and gates. So instead of having like 5 major guilds like we have in solo leveling, we'll have multiple of these small guilds run by these pro heroes. But to continue, entering the gate. Once again, Izuku would be getting most of the stuffing beat out of him, with goblins slashing at him, and him actually taking down 2 of them with this sword that Bakugo gave him. He'd be impressed, wondering how expensive this thing must have cost, looking over at Bakugo as he's taking on a huge hobgoblin. I think at this point, we would see like the final quote unquote dungeon boss. And as everyone's taking it down with Bakugo getting the final blow, Izuku would have managed to grab a single small mana crystal. This being impressive since most of the time he came away with nothing. After having defeated the boss, Bakugo would see the set of doors behind them, with him turning to the rest of the group and saying, "Hey, it looks like this dungeon's not over yet. Do we want to keep going? I don't really want to go back and report this, because that smells like money to me." With him looking back at Deku before thinking, "But let's have a vote. If you want to head back, go out by yourself." Bakugo getting a little greedy after taking on that huge boss and thinking about how he might be able to buy another weapon.
Yeah, I could just see Bakugo like landing the last blow, being like, "Die!" You know what I mean? Like, you gotta add that stuff, bro. You have to.
I think, yeah, he definitely has a little bit of bloodlust, just like in the original, and I think he probably enjoys the hunter activities since he can be as brutal as he wants. So everyone would kind of discuss Zether, and do you think that they're going to go into the dungeon? Are they going to keep going?
I think just like in the original, everybody's going to keep going into the dungeon. Like, I don't see a world where anyone says no, honestly. Because some people are going to get greedy about it. They're going to be like, yeah, with this guy here, we're guaranteed to make it past this dungeon, you know?
Yeah, like, think about how strong this kid is. Like, if we all go, we can make some serious cash here. I get it. So they're continuing into the double dungeon. Zether, it's at this point where they would be walking for around 20 minutes. With the darkness encroaching upon them, Bakugo would be using his quirk in small sparks, creating flames. Although he is a mage-type hunter, he still relies mostly on his quirk since his mana isn't as high, but he can enhance his quirk using magic. This is something that we talked about a little bit, with Bakugo's type not being revealed. So yes, Bakugo is actually a mage-type hunter, with him specializing in fire magic, which improves his explosion's accuracy, range, and abilities by tenfold. But as we get closer to the end of the dungeon, we would find these grandiose doors, with two huge stone statues standing inside of it. Bakugo would turn back as he looks at Deku before pushing the doors open. As the group enters, they would be astonished. At the center of this massive room, if massive was a word for it, there would be a gigantic stone statue. This visage of a god, that's what it appeared to be, sitting on a throne in this kingdom. As the group walks forward, Bakugo would be, like we said, a mage class hunter, meaning he'd be able to read the ancient script that was often in slates within dungeons, just like the original. As Bakugo walks up to looking at the stone slate, he begins reading. "These are the rules of the Karthanon Temple. 1. Thou shalt praise God. 2. Thou shalt have faith in God. 3. Thou shalt..." Someone would turn around saying, "Screw this, I'm an atheist," as they walk out of the dungeon. As they're trying to, a stone statue would swing down.
What? What kind of reasoning is that? I'm an atheist? What? All right, keep going, bro. Keep going.
As the older gentleman is trying to leave the dungeon, we would see
this dude just dies.
We would see as one of the stone statues would swing its axe down, chopping his head as it falls to the floor, blood pooling at his feet as the body slumps over. Bakugo would scream, "What the hell?" as everyone would turn around. Deku would be shocked. What? What just happened? I couldn't even see it! With him being shocked at what's happening, with one of their members having been instantly slaughtered by this magic beast or whatever it is. Anyway, thankfully, Bakugo would not have finished reading the instructions, but he'd quickly go back to reading it, with Deku asking Kacchan to finish what he was saying. Fine. 1. Thou shalt worship God. 2. Thou shalt praise God. 3. Thou shalt prove thy faith. 4. Those who fail to obey these commandments shall not be spared. Well, that sounds like a load of crap. As he turns around, realizing that this was the punishment for failing to worship, praise, and prove faith to God. At this point, every hunter inside would be freaking out, with them asking Bakugo to save them. Izuku would just be in shock still, with their teammate having perished already. It's at this point where everyone would look as the next member would try to escape. At this point, we would see the golden eyes of the statue beginning to ignite, as Bakugo and Deku would both see it, with both of them screaming, Everybody hit the dirt! With the entire team who listened surviving, 2 hunters who had been trying to escape would have had their bodies eviscerated. The light from the giant stone statue having melted their forms. Deku would be shocked, thinking in his head at rapid speed, is there any way we can get out of this? What do you think about that?
My only I like where this is going. My only grimace is Deku not looking at the statue and being like, Kacchan, its eyes.
Its eyes are moving?
Yeah. And then Bakugo being like, shut up, Deku. That thing has been staying still since we got here. You know what I mean? But yeah, keep going. I'm having a blast.
It's cool. I like it. So, this is where we're going to let Deku have a chance to shine. Since he's so analytical, I think just like how Song had in the original, we'll see him actually being the one to figure out the rules of the Karthon Temple and what they mean. Thou shalt worship God. So as they all realized, by lowering themselves to a certain point and dodging that attack, it proceeded to not attack anyone else. So Deku would think that there must be some sort of pose or height limit to where the statue will attack them. He also commented that none of the other statues, the ones with weapons, had begun to attack them, meaning that these rules must apply to everything inside the dungeon. Izuku would tell everyone, including Bakugo, asking that they need to bow to this stone god. Kacchan would be pissed off, with Bakugo saying, "Ain't no way in hell I'm bowing to that thing. It's a monster. I should just go kill it." Bakugo would himself know that that's not realistic, seeing the attack that had completely slaughtered 3 of their teammates already. He would grumble,
I could see Bakugo saying that, and then the gigantic statue would smile at him, sending shivers down his spine. And he'd like just he grits his teeth and he's like, fine. He bows down.
Yeah, so the team all bows, and Izuku would be doing it for around 5 minutes, with suddenly everyone just beginning to stand. So one guy just like, okay, my knees hurt. We're giving this a shot. And after they had bowed for that amount of time, they had cleared the first rule, just like they had in the original. So the god, as Zether just talked about, would be pleased, as it makes a horrifying grimace, a smile that would cause fear to shelter inside of Bakugo and Deku's heart, their spine cold. They would see this horrible grin. That was not the smile of a god, but of a demon lord itself. Everyone would watch as the stone would begin to move, putting its hands on its throne as it begins to stand, being over 100 meters tall. It would begin walking towards them. At this point, all the other kids who were around middle school or high school age would start screaming, asking, what do we do now? With everyone looking to Bakugo and towards Izuku, who had figured out the first rule. What was the second rule? Bakugo would shout it out to Deku again. Thou shalt praise God. Praise. Izuku would be thinking, but he couldn't think of anything. Just get away from it for now. With everyone running around like rats on a mat, we would see the god chasing them as we would hear stomp, 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 stomp. We'd hear scream, then silence. Stomp, stomp. Izuku would be shouting, saying, we have to do something, with him looking around, thinking frantically as 2 more hunters had been taken out. They would see the statues. He'd be looking, seeing the ones with weapons and ones with musical instruments. At this point, another of the hunters would begin praying, with them pulling out a prayer for God. Zether, do you want to hit us with it?
Nah, I'm not gonna say it. You're tripping. I ain't finna hit a prayer for this weak sauce deity.
Fair enough. All right. Anyway, just like in the original, someone would begin praying to the wrong god. In this case, they'd be praying to their god, and the stone statue would give 0 Fs, crushing them. Deku would scream out that it's not a god, it's not a good god. We need to find another way to praise it, with him running towards a harp. Bakugo would see him and mimic him. With now 5 of the 10 hunters dead, there were only 5 hunters remaining. As everyone now runs to a stone statue, we would see as the statues would begin singing, playing their instruments, as the stone statue would stop. With the 5 survivors watching, as it would then go, its face turning back to a frown before returning to its seat. With its face having returned to normal, it would look almost disappointed, as it hadn't been able to kill and finish off all of its prey. Now then, getting into the third rule, now that the statues had been sated, we would see as a huge altar in a circular pattern would rise from the ground. everyone would begin bickering, with them saying they should put Bakugo in there, saying it's his fault that they are even here to begin with since he wanted to push here. Deku would even defend him, saying it was all of their choices, saying everyone had agreed to keep pushing forward. And at that point they looked to Deku, seeing as he was completely uninjured and the weakest among them. With this, they would get a little angry. With some of these being D-rank hunters, they'd say, fine, then you can go in the circle. Bakugo would hold his hand up, saying, wait before realizing that it would be him who would be picked if not Izuku. At this point, we see Bakugo gritting his teeth as the other three hunters would pick up Izuku, throwing him into the circle. At this point, we'd see a blue flame rise, as the countdown timer would not yet start. Eventually, everyone would grumble and complain as they all enter into the circle. With the flames beginning to count down, the stone statues begin moving toward them, only if they weren't viewing them. Izuku would quickly figure this out, with his intelligence and combat intelligence being arguably higher than Sung, with him saying that if they make eye contact, they can survive this. What do you think happens next, brother?
Honestly, with the direction of the story, I think it eventually gets to a point where everyone would either leave Izuku there to be the last one running, and just like in the original, he dies and Bakugo leaves knowing that he literally left his childhood best friend to die. Or we would have the second option, which could be what I think we should actually end up choosing instead, which would be that unlike what you said, where he just pretty much tells everybody to get to the statues, we get a scene where another person makes it to a statue hiding from the beasts, and the music starts playing, and then Izuku says, everybody go to a statue, and we have Deku and Bakugo both close to one. They make it there, and Izuku's just thinking to himself, dang it, it's not. As you know, he pretty much ends up deciding that he's gonna be the one that goes in search of the next one. So Izuku would run off towards another statue with Bakugo saying, Deku, wait, but Deku already took off, and then we would get this scene where Deku's foot gets smashed by the gigantic thing, just like in the original.
Okay. You're making him like a good sacrifice is what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
Okay. I see it. We can go with that. I kind of like the choice of making Bakugo betray him for his own skin, but I'm cool with doing it like that. So either way, you guys can choose. If you like Bakugo, then we'll go with the foot not being ripped off and making Izuku a prime lamb.
I think regardless, he's gonna betray him.
He's gonna leave him.
Yeah, he's gonna leave him.
That is one of the big themes of solo leveling and in this story, is that you can only basically look out for yourself. No one's going to choose to save you over their own lives. So as everyone is leaving and it's just Bakugo and Izuku left, Izuku would look to Bakugo as the doors are pretty much about to close, with him saying, "Go, get out of here. I'll be fine." With him smiling, just like All Might. Bakugo would scream saying, I can't just leave you." But as the statues were getting closer and he was blasting magic at them, he wasn't leaving a scratch. He could feel it, the chill of death approaching him, as Bakugo would scream, "Izuku, I'm sorry," as he just explode flying into the air and leave for the doors, yelling at full pace as he gets out of the doors, with Izuku laughing as he holds the sword that Bakugo had bought for him, with him saying, "It's fine. It's good to die as a hero. That's what I always thought." But as his death would be approaching him, he'd see images of his mother, his father who had left them for milk and gone to America years ago, and all of the people he had known his entire life flashing before him. As the stone statues would be now surrounding him, Izuku would think in his heart, in his head, "It's not fair. Damn it. If I had a quirk, if I was stronger, I wouldn't be the one left behind here." And with that, the story would repeat itself, as the stone statue would stab it into Izuku's gut, his blood now covering his torso. As his eyes would spew blood, he'd get thrown into the air, tossed on top of the altar, blood coating it, as the final statue is about to swing its sword down. That is, until... Notification. Secret Quest, Courage of the Weak, has been completed. You've earned the right to become a player. Will you accept? If you choose not to accept, your heart will stop in 0.02 seconds. Will you accept?
What? And then we would get a scene where Izuku flashes back to the hospital.
Yeah, all right.
It'd be in this moment that Izuku would wake up to the sight of two hunters from the association who are looking at him and pretty much questioning whether he has reawakened, telling him all the details about what was it called? The dungeon?
The double dungeon
Yeah.
incident.
Exactly.
Yep.
They'd be questioning Izuku and he'd be thinking, wait, maybe and as they scan him, he realizes nothing. I'm still the weakest hunter of all time. He'd look down as both of them would leave, and suddenly he'd think, why didn't they ask me about this screen?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the cutoff for this video ends. If you guys are going to be wanting to watch the rest of this series, then obviously just go find the rest of the video on my channel. It's going to be the full movie version of this. So with that being said, we appreciate you for having me on the channel and helping me out with this video. Appreciate you guys for listening and tolerating my voice while I was over here. I know that I'm not as cool sounding as Weeb, but a huge thank you to anybody who made it to the end of the video. That said, I'll be seeing you guys on my channel. Let me know if Weeb sent you guys too. Peace!